Obviously dragged here by her boyfriend, probably for revenge for dragging him to see Twilight. You're like, you gotta humor me. And she kept making these comments throughout the movie. It's like, oh my god, is that his penis? I couldn't help but feel so bad for that guy because he must be so lonely. But then the porta potty catapult happens. Now Steve-O gets drenched in dog shit. And it's, when you see it for the first time, you can't even process it. It's just like, you cannot imagine a situation where a human being would be coated, slathered in dog shit. And yet, here you are seeing it for the first time. And one of the theories behind laughter is it's the sudden exhalation of feelings that you cannot comprehend right now. And seeing a man covered in dog shit does escalate feelings quite a bit. So you laugh to expel it. And I really love that theory, and it's proven many times true whenever you see that scene.
Good choice on Home Done, by the way. Love that movie. One of the funniest scenes in Bridesmaids, the ones that everyone remembers, is the big diarrhea scene while they're trying on the dresses. That's always that's a really funny scene. And I was going on earlier about the fart, most common denominator humor. But even fart jokes and like crude humor can be done in a really clever way. Like, I think the key is the joke about the grossness isn't the joke in itself, it's more the situation. Yeah. And in that scene, for example, they're all trying on dresses, and it's a very formal occasion. You don't want to stay in a white dress, and then it's obviously the reactions. They're all trying to keep composed, and then it just goes all out. While Kristen Wiig is still putting on the bravest face, just trying to chew down. I'm fine. Just sweating profusely. It's all about the execution and how clever it is. Essentially,
I love it when I love it when the bride in there just like, she finally done. She's in the middle of the road. She just kneels down. That's all she can do.
The sort of thing as well. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the sort of gross out humor as well. But I mean, does anyone here know Baldwin? I said it earlier.
Yes.
Okay. Baldwin did this thing where they would do the gross out humor, but most of the time they'd have the leads talk about it, and that was funnier. And I think one that sticks out in my head is they went to a fairground ride. And they were on the waltz, and he said, I feel better now. He goes, yeah, you weren't so good on the waltz. No, you look like a sprinkler as you went round. That would be horrible to see, but it's actually funny to hear.
Yeah.
And I sit there and he goes on the ghost train, and he goes, that was scary. It wasn't coming out of your mouth that time, was it? To see that would be horrible, to hear it is funny.
And I connect even more the situation of the comedy. So the more you can usually connect gross out humor to the situation, it can still work. So I don't believe there's any kind of comedy that cannot work. You just have to be very clever about it. And now with that said, let's talk about shock humor comedy. And this is the stuff that talks about anything that's like taboo, anything that's shocking, anything that makes you feel incredibly uncomfortable. You know, we talked about the two friends and the one shoots the other and stuff, and yeah, that's murder, what the hell? But we're talking the really uncomfortable stuff. We're talking like abortion, we're talking death penalty, we're talking all this really uncomfortable stuff that people do not like to talk about, and someone just diving headfirst into it. And my theory on it is that there is no subject that cannot be talked about. Even in humor, because humor is still as a means to get by. It's a defense mechanism, it's a coping mechanism, it's helping us look at this ugliness and try to acknowledge this is here, this is real, and we're going to adapt with it, we're going to live with it, and we're going to move beyond it, and we're going to work with it, we're going to make things better. That is what laughter is trying to do. I do believe, however, that there is the matter of timing. But the thing, now here's the thing with that though, is that, okay, for example, I think a lot of us have heard Lincoln assassination jokes. Well, sorry for that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like the show? We hear these jokes, and we'll laugh at them, but do you think that joke really would have been appropriate the day of his assassination? Probably not. Years later, we can joke about it, we can laugh about it. Same thing happened with Kick-Ass here. Remember the Nazi joke that we did? Yeah. For a lot of people, the pain of Nazi Germany and stuff was still too close, and they could not. And we're not even. This joke, if you don't know, was us saying, me saying, we're gonna do this big group thing, and one person's against it. I'm like, oh, I see. So you're just gonna divide everybody. You know who divided everybody? The Nazis. Are you a Nazi, Lingard? No, I'm not a Nazi. Good. Now let me tell you about a group of people that worked really hard and were determined. They were called Nazis. And I'm going on and on about this inspiring speech that happens to be about the Nazis. Even though they were just against them a second ago, they're like, yeah! I'm like, are you a Nazi? Or are you a Nazi? Yeah! So, and a lot of people laughed at it. A lot of people were made very uncomfortable because to them the pain is still too close. So it's totally understandable. That's why shock humor is very tricky to do. And what I would advise if you're going to do it, my grandfather had a saying, is that he said, if you can tell a joke and it brings more pleasure than it does misery, then it's a good joke. And I think that's true. If you can tell it as a means to make somebody feel good, there's more comedy in it than there is the shock, than there is the hurt. If it's bringing more pleasure than it is misery, it's a good joke and it's worth telling. But for those who don't see it that way, you better be ready to explain yourself. You have to be ready to explain your humor, because for these kind of topics that can be really painful, really scar some people, you have to be careful. It doesn't mean don't do it, but it means you have to be careful about it.
And sometimes shock humor can be well applied if you don't apply it to a group of people, but if you apply it to one singular person, like someone who is not exactly a nice person, then there's a sort of, I don't want to say it's all right, at least there's a sense of, well, he's a ponce. Okay, that works. Like my Jeremy Clarkson joke. Anyone here familiar with Jeremy Clarkson?
Oh, yeah!
You'll like this one then. Jeremy Clarkson walks into a bar. He goes to the loo and sees a leprechaun taking a piss. He picks up the leprechaun by the shorts and says, I got you, you sudsy little bastard, and I got me a wish for you. That's my Jeremy Clarkson. I know. I want a show on the BBC where I can drive fast cars and disparage Mexicans. And the leprechaun says, in order for that, you have to let me screw you in the ass. And so Jeremy Clarkson drops his denim trousers, spreads cheek and lets him go. And the leprechaun is pounding away into his gritty bunghole. And Jeremy Clarkson screams, I can't believe I'm letting a leprechaun fuck me in the ass. And then Richard Hammond says, I can't believe you thought I was a leprechaun.
When you were talking about shock humor, I was thinking of a comedian called Frankie Boyle. I used to like Frankie Boyle quite a lot because he was very savage, very near the knuckle, and there was that thing about timing. Whenever he comments on stuff, he always appear on stuff like Mock the Week, so it was very close to when it actually happened. But when he kind of detached into his own stuff, it really felt kind of bitter and nasty, and that kind of really put me off. That said, I think that with shock humor, I think the way around it is that it's so hyperbolic, like in that case there, it's so hyperbolic it circles back round again. Going back to Monty Python, there's a sketch they performed in front of a live studio audience where a man goes into a funeral director's to bury his mum, and the funeral director goes, "Go on the other one!" And I'm like, "Are you gonna eat my mother?" Yes. I really don't feel comfortable about this. Well, tell you what. If you feel bad about it, we'll dig a grave and we'll throw up in it. And then the audience storms the stage. And that's the example. That whole sketch is deliberately designed to provoke that audience in its reaction. But it's brilliant because it's so hyperbolic and it's so far-fetched that it loses a lot of the nastiness that shock humor can occasionally provide in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, the aristocrats. Hey, hold on. Yeah, I should talk about the aristocrats. There's a joke called the aristocrats. For those who don't know, here's the original joke. The original joke is, guy walks into a talent agent and says, I have an act for you. He says, okay, what is it? My wife comes in and my daughter, and they get naked, and they shit on the ground, and they cover themselves in it. Well, that sounds terrible. What's that called? The aristocrats. Now, that's not a very funny joke. However, what comedians have now done is one of the few jokes where the comedy is not in the punchline, it's in the middle. Guy walks into a talent agent and says, I have a show for you. Okay, what is it? And you go as gross, disgusting, shocking, anything you want. It can be like 10 minutes long if you want. And the joke is, how shocking and crude can you make this? And it's more of an experiment for comedians just to see what they can get away with. And it usually ends with, the aristocrats, or maybe another punchline or something like that. And they'll go from there. So that's an example, again, of shock humor. More for the shock, but again, it's more, there's still a talent agent there reacting to it. And that's part of the comedy of it. So again, with shock humor, just the more you can connect it to A, a situation, but B, more positive. You're working towards something positive than you are negative. Usually the better it's going to go. And again, do consider the timing element too, because like I said, you have to be ready to explain and go into detail when you're talking about stuff that's so sensitive. The last thing I'll talk about here is rule of threes. How many people know what the rule of threes is? Okay, for those who don't, this is about running jokes. How many of you know the M. Bison, him going, of course! For those who don't, in my Street Fighter review I say, this guy wants to, you guessed it, take over the world. I cut to a clip of him going, of course! And that was it, whatever. And then I did Mortal Kombat after that, and a guy wants to do the same thing. So I said, this guy wants to, you guessed it, take over the world. I cut to him again, of course! And sure enough, like all the movies I was doing, there's always a guy that wants to take over the world. So I just always had to play this clip. Now, if I only played the clip, it would not be funny. What the rule of three says is that with running jokes, you can do it 3 times. Once, you get the laugh. Second, hey, they repeated the laugh. And the third time, oh my God, I can't believe they did it a third time. After that, it won't be funny. Again, I think you can do a variation on it, which is exactly that, add variations. First time, good. Second time, repeat it. Third time, if you do a variation on it, like I'll say, wants to take over the world, and they'll show me they're like, yeah, I'm not doing it. I know you think it's coming, but I'm not going to have it in. It's not going to go. And then the clip will come and smash me. Of course! And it's like the fourth time, but one, and I'll say, and this guy wants to, you guess it! And I'll look left and right. And I'll say, take over the world. And the clip will try to get in, and I'll fight it on screen! I'll try to get this one, I'll fight it on screen! Ha-ha! And they'll crush me again, of course! So, running jokes work. The rule of threes is that usually the third time is the amount that you can do it. You can keep doing it, but you have to add variations. Again, one of my favorites. My cabbages! I think is great, because the first time you see that, it's not funny. The second time you see it, oh, okay, they did it again. This is from Avatar, for those who don't know. There's a cabbage salesman who, everywhere they go, there's always a cabbage salesman who gets his cabbages destroyed. He goes, my cabbages! So the first couple of times, whatever, but they travel so far and over these great distances, I can finally say, how is it possible this guy has the exact same route, and he's always at the exact same place where they're going to destroy his little carton of cabbages? It makes no sense! So I'm playing this one episode where they're doing like a recap of everything. It's like, yes, they've gotten information from scholars, historians, and a surprisingly knowledgeable merchant of cabbage. And it just becomes this wonderful running joke. So, the last thing I'll say, how many minutes we got? 5, okay, perfect. We're going to open for questions right here. The last thing I want to say before we go to questions is that with all the stuff we say here, just keep in mind, there's no book that says right or wrong about comedy, so if you want, you can ignore everything we said up here. Totally fine, that's the beauty of comedy. These are just suggestions and what seems to have worked in the past and what works with a large pattern of people. But that doesn't mean we're right, you're wrong, or anything like that. So go, experiment, and see what you can find out. With that said, let's take some questions. Yes?
Just wondering if it's actually quite related to this. I was wondering if you're going to get alcon again this year.
That has nothing to do with it! No, they invited me back. I'm not able to. I have too many things. Maybe I'll go back next year.
So will you do like a panel like this one then? There, let's make it relatable.
Yeah, yes, I will. Nice. Anyone not have a Yomicon question? Yes.
On the topic of shock humour, going back to it, you mentioned sort of that sometimes the need to explain shock humour when it offends someone. Do you think that on a similar vein, that there's a need to apologise for shock humour, or is that not necessarily the case?
It depends. Again, in my opinion, if the humor you're doing, you acknowledge this was not a smart joke, or this didn't fit, or this was bad timing. If you acknowledge yourself, this was not the appropriate joke at the appropriate time, and you shouldn't have said it, then I say apologize for it. But if you stand by, no, I'm using this to make people feel better, to acknowledge the situation, and to move past it, and to, make people feel better, then I say stand by it, but again, explain yourself. You have to be able to explain yourself. I think that's very important when it comes to shock humor. Yes?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. When I was a child, I remember seeing that review you had about Care Bears. And I actually had a movie with this tiny second with apparently Satan in it. Which would you categorize that? Was that shocking or offending? It's like, what the fuck is it? Like,
I don't know if I can call Care Bears shocking. One of the things I didn't think I'd be saying today. It's shockingly bad, so I guess I'll go with that angle. Let's do somebody higher up. Yes, with the glasses there. Yes.
How do you feel about wasabi cooking?
About wasabi cooking?
Why do you hate him? I did it last year. Looks like you're going to do it this year.
One bite. Just try to get it all in one bite.
Hey, guys, apparently we're out of time, so it only fits that we should end a panel on comedy with me scarfing this down.